We got a long morning, so let's get started. I have a hunch the second hour is going to go overtime, so if I can shorten up, we'll be in good shape. And for those of you that are trying to keep track of what step we're on, you're going to have a hell of a problem because we got two systems going simultaneously, and we're back on the taping, and so we're back to 4, 5, and 6. This is sort of an extension of MacArthur Boulevard the other day. So, and if you want to remain anonymous, then laugh with an accent or something so nobody can pick up your voice on this thing. You know, people worry about that. And some of us are very sensitive about it, and so that's one solution to that. Ask questions in a foreign language. I'd like to start out by reading the preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I'd like to welcome everybody this morning to the weekly Saturday meeting of the PI group. And in case there's anybody brand new, this first 45 minutes or 50 minutes will be a chance to sit back and relax. Nobody will be calling on you, and we'll just be discussing 3 of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, steps 4, 5, and 6. And then at the end of that time, we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back in, and you all have a chance to participate in some kind of a group discussion on a subject that will appear at about 10:30, as it always does. Now, the reason, and I always like to go over this because I always know there's somebody new here, the reason that we get and are spending a lot of time on the steps to Alcoholics Anonymous is for the following reason, that there are a lot of new people, and even people have been around the program a while, and it's possible to come into AA and go to the meetings and really have the feeling that things are really going well. And once that happens to a person, our alcoholic brain seemed to take over and make the following conclusion. I must be an alcoholic who doesn't need to do the steps because I'm going to meetings and I'm not drinking and everything is fine. Now, once a person makes this conclusion, they have a secret. Because you don't share that. You don't very often hear that at closed meetings. You know, you're like, hey, hi. This is a little secret that you have on your own. Hey, I'm different. And once you have a little secret and you're different, you start developing a new set of problems while you're going to meetings and not drinking that are very similar to the problems we had when we were drinking, which is that feeling of being different and alone and unique and so on down. And then... as life has a way of doing, we're around a while and some setback comes along where things don't quite go our way, and we get very uncomfortable and wonder what the heck's wrong and make a decision that maybe AA doesn't work. Many people we've heard say that, AA doesn't work. Well, we weren't even doing anything about it. We were just going to the meetings and not drinking. And so I think the point we're trying to make is that underlying meetings, underlying the fellowship are the principles. And that's kind of the bottom line, that's where, when all else fails, you can resort to the principles of the program, and they're designed for the long-term contentment and peace of mind. I think it's equally important to realize why alcoholics choose to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's very simple. They understand their illness so completely that they realize they're going to die, and they have a fatal illness. And that was the message of the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, is when you come to grips about your own illness and recognize that you don't have a chance. And until you recognize this and you really believe that you don't have a chance, I don't think you'll put in the effort. I don't think most of us would put in the effort that is required, and especially on the steps that we're going to talk about this morning, 4, 5, and 6. I just don't believe that anyone who secretly thinks that they could not die, maybe, from their illness, or someone who thinks that they really wouldn't need the intervention of a higher power. In other words, you could sort of do it alone. You could really, secretly. Or that maybe a higher power wouldn't choose to help you, or that you're sick and tired of any talk of spirituality. You're just not going to get into the steps. And it's been AA's experience that the way a person gets spiritual, or the way you get a person spiritual, and I think this place and AA groups and tough sponsors have a way of getting a person spiritual. And the way you get a person spiritual is to convince them they're going to die. And then everybody gets spiritual. They go, hey, hon, all of a sudden I know how to be spiritual. And it's amazing how we suddenly learn that, because there isn't anything else to hold on to. And we have to reach out for something greater than ourselves. And to me, that's the secret of AA. That's why it works, is that we got a fatal illness. And this seems to be the alcoholic's blessing in disguise, is that fatal illness, because it boots us into places we never would have gone on our own if we didn't have to take desperate measures. And for most of us to think in terms of being spiritual is a desperate measure that most of us wouldn't take a Saturday morning. Hey, I think I'll go down and learn about spiritual, unless it was desperate. I mean, you don't just, hey, I'll casually come down there. I can't play golf. It's raining, so I'll become spiritual. I just don't think people do that unless they think something's wrong. And this is nice. This is sort of why this comes about. And in the long run, many of us look back and say, wasn't it lucky that I had this terrible weakness, because now I found this new strength. And I never would have looked for it if I didn't recognize that I had to. And this sort of leads us through the second step that we talked about a few weeks ago, this searching and coming to believe that we really do need a higher power, or we don't have a prayer. And coming to grips with that, trying to make a decision to put our life somewhere other than in our own hands. That would be to paraphrase the third step. I like to do that because it traps more people than just saying the third step straight out. Putting our life in the hands of a higher power, or getting our life out of our own hands. And many of us can sort of backdoor our way into the third step by recognizing that if we leave things go the way they've been going, we're in trouble. And my sponsor said that what I should try and do is remove the management of my life from the hands of an idiot. And that we might want to consider turning your life over to whatever would take it. And that can be your first, for many of us, our first attempt at thinking about a higher power, rather than some childhood concept of a religious God that we're still dragging around 40 years later, cursing at and saying this doesn't work, and we've never had an open mind on the subject since age 8. And we're around just with a vendetta against organized religion. Well, it turns out we're going to have to reconsider or die. That's sort of out of one of the books here. And this is the inevitability of the illness. And it's nice, because if we didn't reconsider, we would continue to suffer the same anger, the same old feelings we've had that always led us to drinking anyway. The end of the third step suggests that the real secret to it is to become willing, to develop some kind of an open mind that we really are a person who would like to attempt to accomplish the third step. And there are many of us that have been around AA a while wonder, how am I ever going to get that step done? How does one accomplish not being self-centered, and how does one really turn your life over? We hear that expression in AA. And as is so many times the case in AA, it's done indirectly rather than head on, where you sit in front of a mirror and go, okay, I'm turning over, and you're just sitting there and nothing is happening, and then you go, okay, I'm really going to turn, I'm going to think, turn over, you know. And strangely enough, the answer lies right in the book, and it lies right in following directions, which is the fourth step. It lies in taking action on AA's remaining steps is really the proof of the willingness. And of course, the fourth, fifth, and sixth steps are rather painful as self-examination and discussion of this with someone else often is, or I should say always is. And I think we find a lot of reasons to avoid doing it. And there are quite a variety that I'll try and go over this morning. And as is the custom, I've always stuck pretty closely to the 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one of the two books that if you're new you should get right away. One of them is the big book called Alcoholics Anonymous, where for the first time all the steps were written down, and there's a real good discussion of the fourth step in the big book. And then some years later, as most of us know, the original members of AA got together with 13 more years sobriety and came up with a 12 steps and 12 traditions where they tried to use their new insights into these principles in an attempt to offer a further explanation to us about these principles and how they might more easily be incorporated into our lives. And so that leads us up to the fourth step, which has one of the longest discussions, because it is probably takes the longest time to do, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And in this particular discussion, AA takes a shot at being a psychologist and attempts in the fourth step to explain their version, just another explanation of what a human personality looks like. And they choose to use the model of the instincts versus the intellect, which I think serves a real good purpose. It's kind of easy to understand. And it suggests that in a human being, that instincts were placed there by a higher power in order that we could survive. And that these instincts for sex, for security, and for society are just as human as can be. And that they were given to us by a higher power, and therefore we shouldn't feel uncomfortable about having them. I know a lot of us go, hey, I got this feeling, I got these urges, and I probably shouldn't have them. And and we go off on a guilt trip. Maybe no one else did this. I've often been unique in a lot of areas, and maybe I'm unique there too, where I went around going, hey, I got this feeling I shouldn't have, and I get on some kind of, I ought to be able to stomp that out and not have it appear, which would be quite self-centered in that I am going to somehow wipe out God-given instincts in an attempt to be more than human. And it's pointed out here that this is not the case, that we're supposed to have these. This is how we continue to survive, and it pushes us in the right direction to form a society, to form relationships with other people, and to reproduce and keep things going, so that they were God-given, and that the best man or woman who ever lived had troubles with them. So why are we going, I shouldn't be having these conflicts? Who are we to say that? And that's an important message to me, that the best person who ever lived has these problems. And this is what life's all about, is placing our balance between our instincts and our intellect. Unfortunately, that process is called maturity. And alcoholics take a detour on the maturing process when we start pouring the alcohol in and come up with an easier, softer way to dealing with these instincts, which is called vodka. Hey, I don't need to deal with growing up. I can drink vodka as an alternative, because when I drink it, I feel grown up. So why do I want to go through the other routine? And so then we come into AA, and some of us are older than others, and we have to come to grips with the fact that we have not dealt with these basic conflicts. And now is the time to do it. And in order to do it, we have to identify what it is, and it's going to take some effort. And it's going to require a couple of basic tools. One of them's a pencil, and one of them's a piece of paper. And I think that's the proof of the willingness of the third step. When you find a pencil in your hand and you are actually writing down things in an attempt to take this inventory, I really believe that that is what this willingness is all about. Okay, the discussion continues with an example of what are typical problems. What could a typical inventory look like? What are the problems that human beings have? And it starts out with security, financial security as an example, emotional security, where in an attempt to obtain financial security, it could be carried to the extreme that it gets so out of perspective that no matter how much money a person might have, it's not going to help because you have the fear of losing it. So, and this is never discussed with anyone. There is this unrealistic fear that I may not have the ability to continue on working, that I may not have, that I am not going to be taken care of somehow. And I put an unrealistic demand on myself just in that one little area for financial security. How many of us come in and start in on that number on ourselves about job security, financial security, emotional security? I need another person that I can rely on in case something goes wrong. These demands are almost a insistence on a written guarantee about the future, where you sign up and you go, okay, everything's going to be all right for 27 years. And you go, yeah, well, all right. What about this? And what if I get upset? Well, this person's going to take care of it. These kind of demands that we place on ourselves are these instincts gone absolutely wacky, so out of control, we don't recognize what this uncomfortable feeling is. Most of it just sit around with that uncomfortable feeling and just going, I don't know what's wrong with life, but I'm uncomfortable all the time. And this is the chance to write down a list of the things that do bother people. Sexual insecurity, the feelings that, well, I don't know if my demands are going to be met all the time. What are realistic demands? What is an unselfish sex life? What is reasonable? What, gee whiz, am I being treated fairly? And then the self-centeredness that comes in. Maybe I ought to get away from my home where I'm being treated coldly and go find somebody who understands me. That's what I really need. When in reality, we're off on some sexual fantasy which involves other people and so on down, so we act kind of cold at home to set the whole thing up in the first place so that other people will react badly back towards us, and then we can say, look what's going on around here. I'm going to have to leave. It's unbearable. And then, and this happens almost without our knowing that we plotted this whole thing out, and then to sit down with a pencil and a piece of paper and realize that we've done that is painful. And so we elect not to do it. Why would we elect the pain? This is one of the processes of maturing, is coming to grips with pain as a way of getting well and saying, yes, that's acceptable. I'm going to go ahead and experience some of this pain because I know it's going to lead me somewhere. And you know, this is not too foreign to us alcoholics. How many of us accepted the fact we're going to throw up every morning? Okay, so Small price to pay for drinking vodka. What's the big deal? So I throw up every morning. But isn't it painful? Yeah, but it's just part of the price you pay to have a good time. You have to pay the fiddler if you're going to dance, blah, blah, blah. So we didn't have a big problem dealing with pain when we were drinking. We just sort of worked it right in. Now we were paying a big price of pain to go backwards. And here in sobriety, we're suggesting that you can use the same price of pain, only you're going to go forward. You're going to get something for your investment. And yet many of us say, that doesn't make sense. As a sober person, there must be a painless way. And the painless way is to close the book, put the pencil and the piece of paper away, and go to the meetings and don't drink. Because, you see, as I take a first glance, I realize that I don't need to take an inventory. All of my problems were caused by my drinking. And also they were caused by the behavior of other people. You see, I live with some rotten folks, and I work with some rotten folks. And as I took a quick inventory in my head, I realized that I'm the type of alcoholic that doesn't need to get involved in this mess, in this painful psychoanalysis. I don't need those shrinks. I don't need this type of stuff. My problems were all caused by drinking, and so I don't need to do this. And the book is, this book was written by drunks who thought this way before any of us ever came along. So they wrote that all down in here, and then you read it, and the guy's reading my mind again, and it's talking about pride and fear, which are giving us two detours around the fourth step. One of them saying that you don't need to take an inventory because of the reasons I just mentioned, that your problems were all caused by your drinking. Now you're not drinking anymore, or they were caused by the behavior of other people. The other side of the coin, just in case that doesn't work every day as an excuse for not doing it, is fear. And fear said, well, I took a sneaky peek inside, and I realized just from a peek that it's hopeless. I'm not going in there. I'm not going to get in there because it's going to become uncontrollable. It's going to become I am so uniquely horrible and was born with primordial guilt. I was born with guilt that shouldn't be removed. Not only can't it be removed, I deserve to retain this guilt. That's the kind of person I am. So knowing that ahead of time, why do I want to go through all of this garbage? Because I'm so uniquely awful that I don't deserve to have any of the good things that are supposed to happen to a person in the program anyway, so I'm not going to do this thing. And here we have a person who's involved in emotionalism, who's involved in humiliation rather than humility, all in an exercise of avoiding reality and avoiding this step in an attempt to remain different, in an attempt to not deal with the issues. And so we have these two wonderful character defects, pride and fear, trying to get us to go around the fourth step. And of course, once you go around the fourth step, you're going around the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and the eighth. You might as well zip up and carry the message, whatever it may be, which is go to meetings and don't drink, like me. And you can be like me. And the new person's going, well, I like going to meetings, but I don't want to be like you. You're uncomfortable, you're not, but you're sober, and I'm sober but miserable. I got a cross to bear. Sobriety is rough. When you hear some of these songs and dances, of course it's rough. You haven't done the steps. You haven't changed. You're still carrying around the mess that was there when we were drinking, and it hurts. And as time goes by, it gets worse because our secret gets bigger. Now we're sober 3 years. And we haven't done the steps. Now we're sober 5 years, and we haven't done the steps. This becomes very unbearable because what if somebody found out? They might throw you out of AA. And of course you can't admit that you haven't done the steps because that would set a poor example for the new person. So you fake it. Well, yes, I remember when I did the fifth step. It was pretty good, you know, because you see the pride comes in and the pride says, you can't say I haven't done the steps because it says you have to do the steps in order to stay sober. So you are the exception, but you can't let that out. So you're caught in a rather interesting dilemma, which is you got a secret. And secrets are really tough. Well, let me see where I'm at. We're talking about conditions. That was another concept that AA used in explaining the human dilemma, and that is to explain our drinking in terms of outside conditions. That there were continually conditions that came up that drove us into drinking. There are conditions that come along that just cause a person to be angry, or cause a person to be resentful, or cause a person to be frightened. And our perspective was that we have to learn how to change these conditions, or to tolerate them until they change, and then we can get comfortable. And the concept of adjusting ourselves to meet any condition never entered our head. And this is the new approach, is to figure out, hey, isn't it possible to adjust myself to meet the conditions as they come along, to develop the flexibility in a personality that allows the person to be somewhat comfortable no matter what the day has to offer. And this was another part of an inventory in writing down. And the writing down of the fourth step is outlined pretty well in the big book, in the discussion on the fourth step, where it suggests, just as a wild guess, that the top of the list is resentment. I think the line says resentment is the number one offender. And many of us don't relate to that, but some of us have a feeling about resentment, which is I'm sore at. I think that's how they wrote the list in the big book. And you list a bunch, you start going through the various people in your life, and you write down, I'm sore at Mr. Brown. And then it says, well, why are you sore at Mr. Brown? Well, he always pays a lot of attention to my wife. And he's trying to get my job down at the office, and he has a better house than I do, and all this kind of stuff. And then you go over to the right a little further, and if you write this down, and you go, well, why does this cause you to be resentful? Well, I'm resentful because he's threatened to my marriage. He's threatening my self-esteem as I think about the fact that maybe he is a better worker than I am. Maybe my wife really does like him, and what does that mean? Who am I then? And I'm nobody, and so here's the fear that are setting in, and we got these resentments, and we got this anger. And anger is an interesting concept around AA, and there seems to be two facets of it as it gets explored a little bit further and further. One of the facets of anger is, what do you do when you are angry? Now that's a very interesting exercise, and there's been a lot of books written about how you vent anger and how you get it out. But I think AA tries to deal with anger on another level, which is on a spiritual level. And it suggests that dealing with anger is like bailing a boat out that's leaking. And you're out there in a rowboat and there's a hole and water is rushing in and you got a cup and you're going, and you're bailing like mad and you're staying afloat. And eventually your arm is going to wear out. You're going to get tired of dealing with anger. I mean, you know, okay, you do it for a year, that's all right, and then you switch hands. Can you deal with anger for another year? And you go, well, at least I'm staying afloat. But there may come a time when you say, hey, I think I'll fix the hole in the boat. Then I'll rest both arms. And you go, what does that mean? It says, why don't we choose to not get angry in the first place? Well, how do you do that? And then AA says, spiritually. You go, oh, no, I don't want to hear spiritually. And there it is, right out of the big book. God, please save me from being angry. And this is sort of what I think an inventory is about, is to realize, yeah, that's it. I'm setting myself up to stay angry forever, and I'm going to develop a system to bail myself out all the time, and I'm going to spend hours and days and months and years getting unangry rather than trying to nip it in the bud and learning how to adjust myself so I don't have to get angry, so that I can have meet conditions as they come rather than set up these demands. And without writing it down, I don't think we see ourselves. We don't see what some of the things we could become are. And that's what humility to me is all about, is changing my values, setting my goals a little bit higher, which we come upon in the 6th step. But while I'm thinking about that, I have to share with you what I feel about Hubert Humphrey. This guy, just to show you, has changed what I think is possible. That's what the effect that he had on me and has had over the past 6 months or so. As he's dealing with what he's dealing with, he has raised my sights about 8 million miles. I didn't think it was possible for a human being to behave that way, so I never would have thought of doing it. I never would have thought of even trying to pull something like that off. Gee whiz, just go to work and be nice to people, even when you're having all that kind of trouble. I never would have thought it was possible without seeing it in somebody else, and there's a chance to become something that is much bigger than I ever would have set as a goal for myself. I don't know if I can pull it off. I'm not saying that, but I think anyone who has followed this has become a bigger person by seeing how big a person can become. And this is what, to me, sharing is all about, and this is what taking inventory is all about, is to see what these limitations are, but also to see what is possible. Because once this is all down, it seems to be not so overpowering. We're no longer dealing with just feelings, we're dealing with facts. We're dealing with stuff that is manageable. We're dealing with things that we can deal with one at a time. And we're no longer so unique, and we're no longer so different, and it does have a tendency to get a perspective on ourselves. One of the words that's used in the 4th step to describe what an alcoholic is a victim. And the end of the discussion on the character defects suggests that the victim is ambushed by his character defects. And it's the perfect word, because it's something, an ambush is something that is set up way up ahead of time, and then here comes the victim trotting down the road. Dum, 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 dum. And if a drunk is ever a victim, you just have that wonderful movie of dum, 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 dum. And if you're in the audience, and maybe the character defect or whatever his package, his hot button, is his mother-in-law. I mean, I don't know. Maybe just every time she appears, he's drunk because he's so upset. And we're watching the movie, and here he is, the victim, trotting down the road, and we know the mother-in-law's around the corner. As an audience, we go, here's the ambush. Wait till he comes around the corner, and he's going to get so emotionally upset that he's off on an emotional binge that may end up leading to a drunk. And these, without recognizing all of this, we're going to be stepping from one booby trap to another throughout life, wondering why it keeps triggering. Why do I keep getting so violently upset? Why do I become so terrified? And this is the opportunity to learn about ourselves and to learn about our relationships with other people, about our individual problems that we have no idea except for the feelings. Except for the feeling that it's overpowering. It does tie in with the 8th step. There's no two ways about it that when we get into a list later on in the 8th step about people that we'd harmed, our 4th step is going to have 90% of the work done. The 4th step suggests that the alcoholic or the immature person forms two kinds of relationships with other people. One of them is to become totally dependent on another person, and that's how we relate to them. And the other one is to absolutely dominate and control and manipulate the entire situation. That we seem to be comfortable only in one of those two roles. That you're in charge or I'm in charge. I mean, it's got to be that way or I'm not comfortable. And the manipulator, the controller, is bound to just suffer one frustration after another as the people don't understand what's going on, Most of us resent being controlled. Whenever you try and control somebody, they sort of react. And the harder they try to back away, the more we try to control. And the more frustrating and frightening the situation gets, and we just finally figure out it's impossible for us to get along with such unreasonable people. And this is where it goes, you know. And so that means we live in a world filled with unreasonable people. No wonder we're uncomfortable. Better have a drink. It's the only way to stay alive in this stupid world. And this, again, is a chance to look, and so you can see we're really doing an analysis of ourselves. We're taking quite an inventory in an attempt to really get a feeling of what's wrong. And the step ends, as I suggested, with the fact that if we have a list, and it has been filled out to the best of our ability, we truly have satisfied the willingness that was necessary in the discussion of the third step, that we have some proof that we have accomplished this. But this is no place to rest, because alcoholics, above all, are con men. We who have rationalized and distorted reality for so many years should not be so smug as to think that once we finish writing this list down, that here was the one time we didn't con ourselves, that here we were totally honest, we finally rose above it all, and we wrote out everything in total honesty, because now the program really gets tough. Now we don't stay in the room alone anymore, and they're going to drag somebody else in. Whenever we're going to deal up front with someone else, then it really gets uncomfortable, and that's what the fifth step is, which is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Here's the chance to say, I know I've been honest to the best of my ability because I'm willing to put it to the test by letting someone else look at this list or let me discuss it with someone else, and I'm willing to listen to their reaction to it. Up until then, our list is just a theory. It's just a theory that we've been honest. And this is a very uncomfortable step because this seems more painful than making the list. The idea of actually discussing it with another person. Again, there'll be the chance to avoid it. There's probably a lot of people in the program with 2 or 3 years of sobriety with pieces of paper in drawers at home waiting for the right person to come along to share that list, and the list is now fading with age and is rolling up and crinkling and can't be read that well anymore, and we're going, isn't it unfortunate that the right person hasn't come along? Oh good, I still got a little time left. I thought I burned it all. And this leads to uncomfortableness again with a certain amount of sobriety. This is a secret. This same unwillingness to move forward on the fifth step can cause the same kind of anxiety as there was on the fourth step. And that is described in the discussion of the fifth step as anxious apartness. Many of us alcoholics are quite familiar with the concept or the feeling of loneliness, where we're in a world that doesn't understand us. And we go to the bar and drink because there's other people down there just like us. They live in a world that doesn't understand them. And at drink number 6, we all understand each other. There's a wonderful camaraderie. As a matter of fact, on drink number 6, we all buy each other another drink. We understand each other so well. And we have a feeling for a brief moment, right as you phase through drink number 6 up to about drink number 8, that we belong. Oh, I belong here. Oh, you guys understand. My heart opens up to you. And then we go, here, I only got $1.50 left, and we resent buying the guy a drink. Hey, well, and so when he goes to the men's room, we steal his change. Which is getting down there. Now, that's getting low, you know. So, and then we wake up the next morning, and we're back into this this isolated feeling that people don't understand us. So we come into AA, and this feeling goes away. And the fifth step points this out, and it says, hey, you really get the feeling you belong. And you do, but that can't last that long on just meetings and not drinking. That's what we're trying to point out, is that phenomenon of the return of this feeling. And this is all comes from not sharing. Many of us are willing to share up to a point. But many of us have made a decision, it may have been back when we were 13 or 14 years old, that there are certain incidents that have occurred in our lives that shall go to the grave with us. Period. End of discussion. That's it. And then we come into AA and we go, hey, if you don't change your mind on that, you're going to die. And now comes the big decision. You know, like, do I want to die or do I want to change my mind? A grown person. Do I want to die or do I want to change my mind? And we sit there and think about it for months. I don't know. I mean, this is big. And you know, and the funny thing is, we're 45 years old and we're moving with a decision that was made by a 13-year-old. And the reason we're willing to buy that is we were the 13-year-old. And we're cool, and we're a little different than other 13-year-olds. That wasn't a snap decision. This was a very insightful, mature conviction that I'd have to hold this. And we're 45 years old, and we've held to this conviction all these years. You mean I've been wrong all this time? That's a tremendous blow to our pride. Is it, you mean I've been doing this wrong all my life? And that's exactly what people are asking us to deal with. Yes, that's right. You were wrong then, and you're still wrong. When an idea is wrong, it stays wrong forever. And here's your chance to change it. I can't believe that I've been wrong forever. Why? You unique? All the rest of us were wrong for all that time. Yeah, I guess I'm unique, but you don't understand. Secretly, I am superior to all the rest of the people. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the secrets I didn't want to let out. I've been holding that in ever since I was 10, that I am superior to the people around me. I know it, and I've been trying to hold it back, and so far nobody's noticed. Especially at work. I don't get promoted and so on. So I've obviously hidden it well, haven't I? All right, so this is what we're talking about, is this idea that we're going to hold these things to the grave, and we pay a price for that. And the price is we don't get any peace of mind, we don't get any comfort, we don't get any self-respect back, and we don't get rid of fear. Because there'll always be the fear that somebody's going to find out. Hey, I just found out. You did wrong. Oh, my God, you found out. That's not so bad. It's the fear that somebody's going to find out that is difficult to live with. And one way to not have this pain or have that fear level go real high is don't go to closed meetings. Because then the topic may not come up and you won't have to discuss it, so just go to open meetings. But then occasionally the speaker may touch on this very issue, and it's like somebody hitting a nerve in your tooth, and it hurts, and you see somebody in the audience, and the guy tells a little story, and they're very nervous, and they get up and leave. So then, a good alcoholic can think about this and say, one way to avoid this type of pain is don't go to any meetings. Just the principles are the key. I heard that guy say that. They're the real foundation. I'll just stay home and work the principles. Well, I'll tell you, it's very difficult to work the principles alone. It's very difficult to do anything alone, but this is the kind of problem solving that alcoholics very often do. I can remember going to see the movie Lost Weekend, and it caused a great deal of anxiety and conflict because I think I saw some truth up on the screen about my drinking and about my life as I was living it then. And I came out and stood out in the street and thought, and then made a firm resolution to never go to another movie. And recognize that as a solution to that kind of a problem. Hey, I just solved that problem. I'll never experience this kind of anxiety again. I won't go to a movie. So this is not surprising that we might not do this while sober in an attempt not to deal with these problems. It is suggested that there will be certain rewards that come from this step. One of them is to find the sense of belonging come back and this feeling of anxiety disappears. That's one, without a doubt, once we sit down and really share with another human being. And the second one has to do with forgiving ourselves. How many of us talk about an inability to forgive ourselves? And I really think when somebody says, you know, I just can't forgive myself, you really ought to simply say, as a sponsor, have you done your fifth step yet? And he says, no. Well, then don't bother me with that problem anymore until you've said, I've done my fifth step and I still can't forgive myself. Then we'll discuss it. Because it's really, the program points out, this is your chance. This is your chance to get rid of guilt. It's a conventional, age-old method that has been done in civilization after civilization, done in religions, done by psychologists, psychiatrists, by groups. It is sort of a universally accepted principle, but you know how we are with universally accepted principles. We're the exception to universally accepted principles that are going to work. Yes, it works for all of you, but me, you don't understand. But me, you don't understand about me. And there we go. It's not going to work for us. Contempt prior to investigation. It's not going to work for me. How do you know? You haven't tried it. I don't have to try it. I intuitively know I'm going to fail. How do I know that? I've always failed. So what more proof do you want? And he goes, would you mind writing that down? We'd like to see that last little statement there. It doesn't make sense. And that's another dividend is humility. Not humiliation, but humility. Realization finally that once we have discussed this with someone else, once you've discussed a secret with someone else, because there's a synonym for humility, perspective, is sort of a simple word that ties in with humility. Once you discuss a secret with another person, and they go, oh, it's very interesting, it's similar to what I did, and this and that, then we get perspective on that. We go, hey, it wasn't such a big deal after all. No, it wasn't. Well, you made it a big deal. You made it a deal big enough to drink about for years. You made it a huge deal, and so you lack the humility to see it. You lack the perspective, and you can't get humility alone. And that seems to be AA's message. You need another person. You've got to balance it off with something. You can't be alone in a room and compare your secret with somebody else. You can't compare their reaction to your secret. It's impossible to work the program. It's impossible to get honest alone. And that's part of what humility is all about, is that we need someone else. Sentence in the discussion that says, going it alone in spiritual matters is dangerous. Some of us say, hey, I'll just do 2/3 of this step, admit to myself and to God. And if I got a good relationship with a higher power, I don't need someone else. I mean, what are they compared to God? I got a direct pipeline to God. Whenever we hear somebody with this, watch out, because they hear some of the strangest messages. There really aren't too many of us that hear a constant flow of words. Okay, get in your car. This is God speaking. Okay, so drive down Shirley Highway today. Hey, I'm following God. Anytime you have the feeling you got that kind of a pipeline into a higher power, watch out, because about then, God's going to lean down and say, hey, have a beer. Because our experience has shown that when you're getting a voice that clear, you're talking to yourself. And you're saying things you want to hear. And that's dangerous. And you wouldn't probably share that with someone else. They're liable to laugh and ruin your deal. And so this is why another person is so necessary. And it does, many of us who felt we may have had a feeling of the spiritual really found it in the fifth step. If I've heard one common theme in the few years I've been in AA is that people really got a grasp of a spiritual awakening, or whatever that word is, right after or close association with the fifth step. That there was that great feeling that everything's all right. There's that bottom line feeling that you live in a good world and that people do understand, and that you're all right, and that these principles are going to work for you. That tremendous rush of comfort that comes in when a person has a close relationship at that moment, anyway, with a higher power of some sort, which is whatever your feeling about that is. And the other one is, if this is, in most of the literature that I've read, is the method that guilt finally leaves. For those of you few out here that have that guilt problem, that secret, that you really are guilty. Not that you did something to feel guilty about, but I'm talking about really guilty people, you know, the ones that are different than all the other ones. You were born guilty. This is the chance and the vehicle to get rid of that absurd feeling, which comes from a tremendous amount of fear and self-centeredness, that I really am a guilty person. And that's another one of the rewards of the fifth step. Then the last few minutes of this hour I want to spend on the sixth step, which is a very short discussion, and it's a very short step. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And if there is a word that is key to this step, it is perfection. Because that certainly would be perfection. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And the interesting thing that comes into this thing is, hey, we have a theory here that if I became willing to have a defect removed and asked for it, that it would be removed. And, you know, for most of us, that's just a theory. I mean, what proof do I have that this could really work? And for us in AA, that's an absurd question. We go to an AA meeting and every speaker that we hear gets up there and says, and I was a hopeless alcoholic and I came to AA and now I'm comfortable, I don't even think about drinking anymore. And for most of us, that has already happened. That obsession with alcohol has been taken away. And it was taken away in the very same process that any other character defect could be taken away. We became willing to have it removed. We admitted we were powerless over it. It was absolutely hopeless that we could get rid of this obsession. And yet this willingness, and did we discuss it with someone else? Did we really take a fifth step on our drinking? Good God, did we? We discussed it freely at meetings. We discussed it with our sponsor. We said, hey, yeah, we did a great long study about our drinking, and it was removed. Without any question, we found that it was removed. And we were left with that sense that something truly miraculous had happened. That here's a guy or a gal been drinking all these years who doesn't even think about drinking anymore. Now, with that evidence, we come up to something like procrastination. We come up to something like financial security. We come up to sexual security, which is one of your big problems, my big problems, and I go, who am I to think that if I simply work 6 and 7 on this, that'll be fixed? And we go, well, you had the biggest problem you ever had in your life was fixed by this method, and you don't think it's going to work here. And this, if there's a dilemma that's never been figured out by AA or people or anybody satisfactorily, it's that one. Having had a perfect evidence that this system works absolutely, why do we say it's not going to work on the rest of our problems? And this seems to be the human dilemma. And I think this is a question of faith, where we have to say, well, it doesn't feel like it's going to work, but I'm going to do it anyway. Also, our other character defects are not so obviously killing us as the drinking was. We could see the drinking clearly as a gun pointed right at our head that, hey, this has to be fixed. I have to go to desperate measures on this one. But these other ones, maybe I don't have to go to such far measures. Maybe I can do it myself. Oh, is that a nice thought for an alcoholic? Because as soon as we say, maybe I can do it myself, then we can close the book and we can put it away and we can just sit there and go, I will no longer be a New Year's resolution kind of thing. I will no longer be screwed up sexually. Hey, I feel got some funny feelings here. Gonna do it myself.
That line's from Woody Allen. Practice a lot alone. Didn't ring any bells around the room. Let's get everybody's name who's laughing. Oh, boy. The sixth step would suggest that there is something called perfection, there is something called character building, and that it might be attempted because it's the right thing to do, period. And there aren't many of us who are familiar with that concept. You mean I'm going to do it just because it's the right thing to do? What do I get? I mean, I don't relate to just doing something because it's right. I don't understand doing something because it's right. When do I get to feel better? And they say, well, people who do things because they're right end up feeling better. Happiness is a byproduct of right living. But it's going to take an adventure or a risk in faith to attempt it. Again, we're attempting to get peace of mind, but you can't get it directly. It's almost like you get it indirectly by learning some principles and then deciding simply to live by them because that you've chosen them as being correct. That there are certain things, and one of them is character building, or learning a set of values to live by that you feel comfortable with and then living by them. And we go, well, where am I going to get these set of values? And they say, well, a lot of us have a conscience. As a matter of fact, that's that little voice you tried to shut up by drinking all the time. I don't want to hear all that. And there's signals inside. There's some intuitive knowledge as to what the right thing to do in this situation is. And generally, it isn't what we want to do. We don't want to just stay home and maybe work on something around the house tonight. There's an urge that needs to be taken care of. There's a thought that I deserve some pleasure right now, and I'll get around to this. And then there's the feeling, yeah, but if I do that, I'm going to be in conflict because somehow I know it's not right. And heaven forbid that I should just do something boring because it's right. Heaven forbid I should think this through and realize that in this case my instincts are outweighing and are trying to control me. I'm going to try and learn discipline is painful. I can't get into discipline. That's for some kind of a monk. I can't. What is that what are the benefits of living a right life? I mean, that's all right for some guy in the church. That's all right for that. I'm not that kind of a character builder. I'm not going to sit around and worry about moral values. Blah, blah, blah. And then our sponsor, well, you probably die. Well, I'll learn a little bit about moral values, a little, and you get driven into trying this. And that's what the sixth step is all about, is after making this list and after really finding out what's wrong and what's making us uncomfortable is our decision, how comfortable do I want to get? How spiritual do I want to become? And many of us settle for sort of what they call in the sixth step, we settle for as much perfection as will get us by. And if there's any problem in human life or in AA, it's the willingness to settle for mediocrity. So, well, for me, I'll settle for sort of halfway. And then we complain about only getting halfway. And we already said, I choose halfway. I'm willing to go halfway as far as the effort goes. I'm willing to go halfway as far as setting perfection, spiritual perfection as my goal, but I want all the results as if I had gone all the way. I mean, that's sort of what we want. I want the results without the pain. I want to experience all the good feelings, but I don't want to go through that road that you're outlining. I don't want to go to this length to get them. So I'm going to sort of settle for the following. And then we have certain amounts of I'll settle for partial financial security. I'll settle for partial this and partial that, and that's all we get. The sixth step is sort of where you dial in what you want to get out of AA. This is what you are going to ask to receive. You know, if you could write down and say, God, this is what I would like for myself. And this is where we write it down. And it's funny how we just settled for just enough to get by. And this is a chance to think that through. Is that the kind of person you are? You should only get half of this? Have you really been selling yourself short? Have you really been caught up in the television commercials that material things will bring all this happiness? Has that ever worked? Isn't it time to reconsider? This is what the step is suggesting. Isn't it time to reconsider and go back and say, hey, now that junk doesn't work? That's baloney. I really have to rethink about being a spiritual person. I'm going to rethink all about myself. I'm going to say, hey, am I climbing up the wrong ladder? Am I trying to get there through the wrong method? I'm going to rethink my whole life. And this is the chance to do it. What am I willing to do here? What do I deserve? What kind of a person am I? This is the, I think, where we suddenly become what I was trying to describe in my feelings about Hubert Humphrey, where we go, hey, I had set very limited objectives for myself because I didn't know any better. Hey, I was an alcoholic because of ignorance. Hey, I really didn't understand. I was never taught about life. You know what I mean? This is what AA is about. It's an educational program. It's a PhD in living is what AA is. Hey, I've been selling myself short. Hey, I'm doing dumb things. Hey! And the light comes on. But it only comes on with a willingness to let it come on and to come to grips with, I can get a lot more things here. I'm willing to take a look at these things, as painful as it may be. The discussion of the sixth step ends with one sentence that I'd just like to read, and then I think we can take a break. The step ends where it says, the moment we say no, never, our minds close against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. This is the exact point at which we abandoned limited objectives and moved towards God's will for us. And I really believe that the sixth step is where we stop setting our own objectives and become willing to have those that were intended for us. And this is the gift of AA, is that we're now going to get something that was thought up and intended for us rather than trying to go after something that we think is the best for us. And we don't never been any good at figuring out what's good for us ever. And this is the chance to put our faith into action on this particular issue. So it's no wonder that it is called the step that separates the men from the boys. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back in and then get everybody started on this. Okay, let's...